Oh, you want to do it the easy way?
Yeah, I'll do it the easy way. Thank you. All right, thanks a lot. As many of you know, I carry these little booklets around and give them to anyone that'll take them. And little booklet, it's a May I Ask You a Question booklet, and it has bad news and good news. And those of you watching, I'll just share this with you because this ties in with our message today. The bad news is about us. That's because we're sinners. And because we have sinned, we're not perfect, then we don't deserve to go to heaven. The good news, though, is that Jesus came, God the Son came, and died on a cross to pay for our sins. And all we have to do is believe he did that for us, and we get to go to heaven. We get our sins forgiven. We have a new relationship with God. So that's the bad news, and the good news that's talked about in this booklet. It's just the gospel, and it's in a readable form. But today we're going to look at the portion of Micah that John read, 4:9 through 5:1, that talks about bad news and good news. There's bad news. There's the Babylonians are coming. The good news is, number one, is they'll be released back to Israel from Babylon. But also, more good news follows in the verses he read, talking about the millennial kingdom, what it's going to be like, and it's interesting. Just a little bit of a review. You know, Micah's the prophet, and he prophesied around 700 BC. And he prophesied to the southern two tribes, Judah and Benjamin. He was a country boy, okay, and he prophesied to the poor people because they were just the rich people in Israel were really they didn't treat the poor people very nice. They ripped them off, and he talked about that before. But last week in verses 1 through 8 of chapter 4, we took a look at characteristics of the millennial kingdom, and there were 11 of them in those 8 verses, and they're all good. You know, there's not going to be any war. Israel will be strong. Jesus will be controlling the world. He'll be the leader of the world at that time, and Jerusalem will be the center of government for the whole world. So that's gonna be great. I'm looking forward to it, and I know exactly what's going to happen in the future. I just don't know when it starts. Okay. The next event is the rapture. That's where every one who's a believer meets Jesus in the air. If we've already died, then our bodies will get these resurrected bodies to come up and meet Jesus in the air. And so it's going to be great. But after that, there's 7 years of tribulation, hard times where God's unleashing judgment on earth, and then the millennial kingdom where he comes back. And that's part of what we're talking about today. So, you know, in our lives, though, we have bad things and good things. We call bad and good. You know, sometimes, though, the things we look at as bad really are things that we need in our life to prepare us for something else that's coming in our life, or to help us with other people. See, sometimes we go through hard times so that when we come across another believer or someone who's not a believer that's going through hard times, maybe the same thing we went through, we can help them because we know where they're coming from. We know what's going on in their life because we went through it. Not that I want hard times, okay? But sometimes that's the case. Well, we're going to look at this briefly, and again, in your bulletin you have an outline, and verses 9 and 10 talk about the Babylonian captivity. Now, this is what's weird. If you were one of his people that was listening to him or read what he wrote, he's talking about Babylon, but they're not a world power. This is 700, give or take, BC. They're not a world power for 200 more years at least. Assyria is the world power. And in fact, Assyria, when he was writing this, they had already come and taken the northern part of the country of Israel captive. And they came down to the southern part. And they took a bunch of towns captive. And then they came to Jerusalem. But God took them out. Remember we talked about that? There were 185,000 Assyrian troops camped outside Jerusalem. And what happens? God wipes them out in one night. Only a few got to go back home. The king and some of his buddies got to go back home. God did not let the Assyrians take Jerusalem. Well, he's talking about the Babylonians. And they were a country at the time, but there were no, Assyria was the powerful guys, and Babylon, they were just they're just hanging out, trying to survive, and they weren't powerful. That's why this whole prophecy is a little bit, if you were there, you're going like, wait a minute, Babylon's gonna, no, they're not. They're not powerful, Well, let's get into the text. It says, "Why do you cry out loudly? Is there no king among you, or has your counselor perished?" Now, a king is kind of like a counselor. He gives, he tells the people what they're supposed to do. This is talking about at least 200 years in the future from where Micah's, speaking, talking about Babylon. We know that we get down here in the latter part of verse 10. It says, "The agony has gripped you like a woman in childbirth." Any of you ladies who've had kids, it's painful, okay? But also, there's one more thing. Once you start in labor, you don't just quit. You just say, we're going to have labor next month. No. It just keeps coming until the baby comes, okay? Or until you have a C-section or whatever, But it didn't stop. And Babylon wasn't going to stop just because these people were sad and moaning and groaning. Again, this is 200 plus years in the future, what the people are going to be doing. Sometimes it's hard to really